there. So presumably with the disclosure and exopolitics, I mean, post 2015, opening us up to the prospect of now, Mars is the reality, thus civilizations beyond Mars are also the reality, and if they are essentially humanoid too and civilized, by that extension, we're opening up a whole new panorama of, relations.
Well, and apropos of that,
and hospitality, so to speak, or diplomacy, or,
Apropos of that is a dimension of PIA 10214 that I didn't mention, which is a speculative notion that Alfred and I were maintaining, that perhaps PIA 10214 is a Martian psyop directed at us. In other words, we land there and they stick all these examples of their creatures, their humanoids, and their artwork in their Yosemite or their Westminster Abbey or whatever. And I had a discussion with Bill Ryan at Project Camelot about that, and he said, Andy, if they dropped a probe on this planet, you couldn't expect that they would land in Times Square or the Mall in Washington. How is it that PIA 10214 did so? I think it's a suspect photograph. In other words, Bill's point was, how is it that this particular image is chock full of life? Maybe that was a Martian psyop, that at one point they would pick a particular day when the rover Spirit was photographing and just swarm the place with life forms. And that may explain why, for example, some of the animals are marching towards the camera. And if that's the case, they may be literally saying, hey, we're here, and this is what you're going to have to cope with as you interact with our planet. Yeah, so it may not be PIA 10214 may not be a NASA psyop, it may just be a Martian op. So,
well, anyway,
Bill makes a good point.
If we can welcome Martians in, then we could welcome
Mexicans,
Pleiadians, or whatever, as long as everybody's civilized.
Well, my point about the evolution, of human rights law, environmental, and those in their civil rights, is also in immigration now. Immigration has become a global phenomenon where people of diverse backgrounds are integrating in all of the countries of the world, and then the natural extension of that would be to integrate sentient humanoids from other planets in our population, as long as they can be screened for things like epidemic diseases that we don't want introduced on Earth. Oh, I don't want to end on the phrase epidemic diseases. Come on. Anybody else? Yes?
How about the oxygen? As you said, you used certain masks for oxygen. How did the other people live?
I used a mask as a precautionary measure during the first trip up there by myself in July of '81, and I was urged to take it off there, and I could breathe. So that was the only time I took a mask up there. The other people in our program were regularly not using masks, and in fact, the female in that first group of three who greeted me after my first journey up there, and then Courtney Hunt Courtney Hunt was a chain smoker, like 3-4 pack a day. So chain smokers were able to breathe up there despite the fact that the oxygen is only 10%. So, and then I also observed how at Curtis Wright in 1970, the two larger males seemed to be pretty barrel-chested, as if they had evolved, in their lineage, they had evolved large lungs to gather up more oxygen. But it's 10% by volume, and it wasn't that hard to breathe at all. It was really no stuffier than a room that needs to have the window opened. Yeah.
when you were running from those creatures, did you kind of get into cardio?
Well, yes. I got cardio challenged as we were scampering down the staircase, in the sense that my heart was beating out of my chest from fear and immediate exertion in an atmosphere, 10% oxygen by volume. But where I really felt the 10% air making a difference was when I was walking with Courtney, my thigh muscles began screaming with pain, and my calves. And I said, God, I got this huge, I never have cramps. I've never had a cramp swimming or doing anything on Earth under normal conditions. And I said, my leg muscles are absolutely cramping up. They feel like they're being crushed. And he said, yes, we'll just deal with it because it's from hypoxia, from the lower oxygen. So in exerting myself less than I would on Earth against gravity, it still resulted in a fatiguing of the leg muscles that was literally sharply painful. So that hypoxia is an issue when you exert yourself up there. And that's why we weren't like running around looking around every 30 seconds. We were just sort of doing, kind of like what Secret Service people do. Like we'd be talking to somebody doing, oh yeah, I know what you mean. We were looking around. We weren't running around. We were actually urged to remain as sedate as possible unless we were running from a predator and had to save our lives. Yes. Yes.
Okay. In your discussion with Barry about his name change, what was that thought process?
I didn't have a discussion with him about his name change. I asked him his name in Weed, at the college grounds, and he said Barry Soetoro. When I met him close to summer, or 2 years later, he introduced himself as Barack Obama, and we actually had a discussion not about his name change, but just about his unusual name. And he said, oh, my dad was from Africa. And that's another reason why I support the president against these insinuations that he's not a legitimate American, because when I met him, he said, my dad's from Africa. He didn't say, I was born in Africa, like somebody would.
But he remembered you from the thing 2 years back.
No, he may have, but I didn't remember him because I'm dealing with somebody who's 2 years older, taller, thinner, with a different name. Yeah. And in fact, if you look at the Barack Obama's pictures, he looked like his high school graduation photograph, where he looked heavier. He had an afro, and he was calling himself Barry Soetoro. So when I met, I thought I turned this off. Sorry. When I met Barack Obama after he had spent a year at Columbia, also in a more sophisticated environment than Eagle Rock, California, or even, let's say, Honolulu growing up or whatever, he was a different person. He had evolved. And as somebody who reached the presidency, especially as a member of a minority group, must be a pretty quick study. So it was almost like I was meeting a different person. I didn't say, and besides that, I was blocked as a result of the brainwashing from remembering the training course 2 years earlier. That's another paradox of the case. Even a year later, in the summer of '81, when Courtney pulled this kind of Harry meets Sally thing between me and Regina in Chatsworth, I didn't remember her from the previous summer. In fact, she joked as she was leaving about that. She said, oh, Courtney, you got this guy brainwashed or something. It was just, I didn't recognize either of them. Now, they may have recognized me. One theory that Brett and I have is that they were part of like a Team A that wasn't brainwashed, and they were circling back to see who among those who had been brainwashed who were going up, but Team A didn't go up and wasn't brainwashed. That would be very CIA-ish if that was the case. Jan.
I have a question, and for all of you three, maybe it's more for Laura, and it has to do with as they were wanting to invite you and entice you and the boys to go to Mars. Did they speak culturally about what was set up, what you would find? Was it set up as a democracy? Was it set up kind of like as a mini America, like someplace in Chatsworth or Venice Beach, or was it going to be set up because this whole aviary thing sounds pretty creepy and everything? What was it? How would you actually be enticed to go up there, and how would it be laid out so that you guys could function?
Right. It was more about protection and survival and things. The target date 2012, and transporting stuff through what they called arcs. There's arcs, but there's also, as far as what was going on there, I didn't get a lot of info about that. I only could overhear conversations. It was like he'd be on the phone, just kind of strategizing everything, and particularly about terraforming. And it was a lot about it was in preparation, but not so much about what was already there. It was just preparation and creating upgrades and doing things to make it more hospitable and more advanced. So, but the lure and the enticement part was more about, I'm doing this to protect you, or I'm trying to protect you, or, and that, we really had to go because of the looking glass technologies. We're not able to detect anything past 2012. And there was some level of communication, though, that certain events would happen that would cause us to need to go, even though there was no direct proof. or direct information, and that's why I made the choice that I did, because it just, what I felt really drawn to doing here on Earth was going to fill in that blank of what they couldn't tell me. And there's so much not being told to me that, and so much that creeped me out that the enticement turned pretty sour pretty quick. And the prophetic dreams that I was having as well. So it was more the panic of survival that was used as enticement more than, you know, telling me what I was going to expect and how great life would be, and that not great. I mean, I don't think, but you know, like a preparation as far as, you know, it'll be fine for you and your boys, it'll be comfortable. It was not a polite thing, it was manipulated. I wasn't even supposed to know about the characters in the aviary, really, until I was going to be given a handler and really a part of it. The rest of it was kept secret to me until I was kind of caught in the net. And then if they had caught me, then I probably would have found out all that. And so I wanted to get a little bit closer to get more information, but not at the risk of getting ensnarled. So there had to be a stopping point, and all I could do was listen to conversations and investigate the names.
And I think if I might follow up on Laura's comments, I think it's interesting, and I can't tell you how much, what a gift Laura is as a friend and colleague. For me personally, specifically in the sense that she's corroborated the very psychology that was used to manipulate me in a very direct way. For example, the use of this, like, catastrophism. You know, if you take a highly ethical human being and you say, you have to serve, you have to make this major change in your life. You know, you're going to UCLA and you're going to have to start going to El Segundo and jump rooming to Mars as an errand. Or you're, you know, 25 years later, you're going to have to go up as a mom with your 2 kids and stay there. They were clearly targeting highly ethical people with notions of catastrophism. You know, the Ark, that would be Noah saving life forms during the deluge. That's a kind of a catastrophic scenario. 2012 as a catastrophic trigger year date, and so forth. Because look what Hunt said when I said, no, you know, some people might want to be astronauts, but I want to pretty much just become, you know, a maverick journalist or whatever. You know, I was writing for the Bruin and starting to freelance around that time for the first time in my life, you know, just as a writer. And I said, no, I don't really want to get involved with Mars, and it's never really been my bailiwick, you know. And I finally said to him, well, what, you know, why do I have to go? Why are you being so urgent about this? And he said, because the survival of life on Earth depends on it. And that's the same catastrophe script that Laura was given, or prompting, and that might, you know, what we have to remember is that, I mean, I don't know, this would be something for future articles by Alfred, but that would be, well, what if it was just the CIA line just to establish the U.S. presence there, vis-a-vis the potential Russian or Chinese presence, for example?
Right, and these were the same people associated with the weaponry that's damaging our planet, our health, and everything. So it doesn't make much sense to be lured into a, you know, to the catastrophe when they're the ones with the buttons and the gadgets of destruction here on Earth.
And we know now from Brett's testimony that he wasn't given a suicide pill and he wasn't given a gun. Well, he was 13, but I mean, he was up there. So what was that about? That means they were willing to use a young person without giving the security precautions that protections that we were given. So I was just struck by the analogies in the way that, you know, my psychology as an ethical young person was clearly manipulated in a highly similar way. And, you know, what are the chances? So that, for me, that's pretty profound. I'm very grateful to Laura for that.
And what we were talking about too with the fact that they have the capability of creating these type of disasters, to me it was about them protecting me from the disasters that they were going to create, and then come back and create some kind of new world order. And I just refused to be like used in that way, obviously. But I felt like these characters were very much affiliated with the catastrophes and the disasters because they had those kind of technologies. And that's the same kind of manipulation they did to my ex, which is acting like his abductions and how they set him up to have those experiences were part of their artificial telepathy in my lab programs and the alien technology that they had. So anyway.
Yeah. Ken?
It's just, again, I go flashback 150 or some years, I see the corollary is slightly different though, but how propaganda was used. You remember like Horace Greeley in St. Louis, go west, young man, the Oregon Trail. You know, people being told that, you know, there's something out there, you know, take your risk, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've used propaganda before, you know. Of
Right.
course,
when vested commercial interests
Yeah.
have had a vested interest in
Right.
creating a frontier
Yeah.
movement, like the California Gold Rush. Most of the
Right.
miners just
Exactly.
found destitution in California. A lot of the money was made selling blue jeans and shovels, and most of the miners failed. There may be an analogy here to inducing young people to go up and establish basically the U.S. presence on Mars, not because it will help us protect Earth from astronomical cataclysm or from extraterrestrial incursion, but simply so that the U.S. of A. has the high road by occupying the planet that every 2 years comes closest to Earth. That's very much what, if you look at the history of the CIA, I think that on a coin toss basis, or maybe using Occam's razor, that's probably what was going on, was just catastrophism in the service of naked
Always an
imperialism.
emergency.
So that will be how I'll spin it when I'm on with Amy Goodman. But no, I mean, seriously, I think that may have been what was going on. Courtney Hunt, after all, was a cousin of E. Howard Hunt of Watergate fame, and a more distant cousin of the Hunt brothers of Texas, including Haroldson Lafayette Hunt, who we now know is one of those individuals present at Clint Murchison's house the night before President John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, and had actually funded the newspaper ad that accused John F. Kennedy of treason. So I include Courtney in my story as a hero only in the sense that he was a Mars explorer, and he was a provider of critical information to me long after we worked together. He was an information hero in that sense, but he really was part of that corrupt apparatus that the CIA is. I think my father was more of a pure patriot type. He was from rural Pennsylvania. He had been in the war. He had seen the need for a defense establishment in the U.S. that could prevent war. So I think he was more of an idealist than your average CIA operative of that era. But it could have just been blind, naked deception by the CIA simply to assert U.S. hegemony over Mars in competition with other nations. So, start?
Why would it be the CIA that would have hegemony over that? Like, why is it their job?
Capitalism's invisible army,
Oh,
as Buckminster Fuller called the CIA.
Nice.
No, the CIA takes its orders, from the Council on Foreign Relations. So it would have been the marching orders of the Rockefeller faction. But I would defer to Professor Weber.
Speaking of CFR.
Laura.
Did they ever do any time travel, like going into the past of Mars or the future of Mars?
I was not privy to that, and I think it would have been because of the segregation of the two sets of information in the projects. The same way that I can take my experiences and then spin them into prongs of my truth campaign. I mean, organically and authentically, but just, basically evolve them into a public advocacy effort is possible because they completely segregated my time travel and Mars experiences except for the jump rooms. So for example, I was never in any chronovisor lab in West LA where I was shown what Mars was like 10,000 years ago and what it would look like 1,000 years after the colony was established. So,
Were you aware of any reptilian presence or Anunnaki presence on Mars?
well, reptilian in the sense that there were predatory reptiles, but in terms of the schema implied by Anunnaki or reptilian, no. And so if part of it was to create an extraterrestrial defense posture, like Hunt said, how come I didn't see any cosmic Waffen-SS anywhere on the surface of Mars? It kind of begs the question of what he was really talking about by an extraterrestrial defense posture. That may have literally been cosmic Cold War propaganda or cosmic Cold War paranoia, because I never saw any evidence of a battle between U.S. forces and Martians or anything off-planet besides that sculpture of a UFO, in this image. In other words, there didn't seem to be anything going on except the creation of a U.S. presence there. So, Jan.
If we have that kind of technology to get to Mars, are there, we could have that technology to get to, if you can do it once, in one place, we could do it anywhere.
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, one of the constraints on teleportation, presuming that the jump rooms are Tesla teleportation based, as Hunt's comments seem to suggest they were, but I don't know. They may have been even a more advanced technology. One of the constraints is you have to be in a habitable zone when you arrive. So, for example, if you jump room to Venus as a protoplasmic organism, 60% made of water, you would quickly be burned alive in its 600-degree Fahrenheit surface temperatures. So you have to, if you're going to jump room anywhere else in the cosmos, it has to be to a habitable zone.
Well, there's so many others, close
Yeah.
solar system.
Yeah, some of the moon, in other words, those planets that are within the Goldilocks range presumably can be jump room to, and many or all probably have been in the intervening 30 years, which I guess is an implication of my presentation. But I don't have any information about that because I was, dismissed from that part of my activities for the government in 83. Yeah.
One of the reasons for the Mars base was because of human survival of some kind, and a global cataclysmic event that would, Mars base would be that place where they could survive. Why would not the global cataclysmic event also affect Mars? Why would that be isolated only to the Earth and not?
Well, he didn't say a global cataclysmic event. You're kind of conflating two parts of my presentation.
Okay.
I was talking about the solar system catastrophe that severely damaged Mars and Earth, and then I was talking about how Courtney Hunt stated in trying to induce me to go up there because human life on Earth depends on it.
Yeah.
But even if it was a catastrophic scenario, one ready explanation is the fact that Mars is on an irregular orbit from Earth, and hence it could be a survival base in the event of something coming directly at us that was known to be hitting us and quite possibly would not hit Mars because they just don't go around the sun. Mars traces an irregular orbit relative to Earth. So there's times when we could essentially put enough people on Mars for the whole Earth to be knocked out of the heavens by a huge comet or something, and we could still protect the human genome on Mars. So in the statement that I issued with Laura after Alfred interviewed us, we stated that it is really a very good thing to think about protecting the human genome on Mars and other planets, but not if it involves basically slavery, genocide, and mind control. Slavery of the participants, mind control of the participants. And what?
And like the human race and what they're doing here to just...
Yeah, and doing it to this population, the whole postmodern dystopia that we're in, because we have a negative space program and a negative technical infrastructure that has to be changed into a positive one. But so we commented on the fact that it really is a good thing to try to protect the human genome in this way, because we know, for example, if you read a book like, let's say, Graham Hancock's book, The Mars Mystery, we were hit by something that may return. And that's indeed why we should protect the ruins on Mars, so we can figure out where it's coming from and when it's going to arrive. So it makes perfect sense to protect the human genome on other planets, but not if you have to impose a fascistic, mind-controlling technocracy to achieve it. That we don't; those elements are not necessary to have a space program. There was no need to brainwash Brett and I to forget our summer in Shasta. What was the point? I was a tough kid. I had time traveled as a little 7 or 8 year old. I was now 19 years old. It was just their exercise of their own sick view of human nature and of government.
And if there's total honesty and disclosure and the human race was privy to everything, then people could make the choice to go, and nobody would have to be mind controlled. It would just be an idea that people could say, yeah, we understand that with cataclysms and these kind of threats that this is a smart idea, and people could make a choice. And it would be all done in an open way, and we could actually trust our leaders, and we would actually feel cared about and taken care of, and that's just not the case. So something is being hidden deeper than all of these scenarios.
Yeah, and we know we get optimum performance from people who want to do things. I mean, if you want to pitch for the New York Yankees, you get your shot at high school and college and AAA baseball. You don't find somebody who wants to be an archaeologist and say, well, you're going to be a pitcher for the New York Yankee if we have to mind control you to achieve it. I mean, that makes absolutely no sense. Jan?
So they've had this time travel technology for 40 years, right? And
More than 40 years.
more than 40
Yeah.
years, and they've got this jump room to Mars.
For at least 34 years.
It seems
Could go
to
to
me
1977.
that they used the time travel technology then to look at the past and future of Mars, to understand a cataclysmic event, and the fact that they didn't stop 9/11 and they haven't stopped Haiti, and in fact maybe encouraged a lot of these things, or stayed out of the way and let these things happen. It seems to me that there are then people in the know about, certain, cataclysmic timelines. And,
Well, we'll never know as long as we won't know as long as what is perpetuated is what Jim Marrs has called rule by secrecy.
Yeah.
At the heart of my truth campaign is not a dual focus on time travel and life on Mars. I am advancing the cause of those two issues, but it's really focused on the fact that we have to move beyond the model of rule by secrecy that oppresses us. I mean, we haven't even been getting valid data about how industrial forces are mutating the human genome. Look at the pathfinding work that Loren Murray and Alfred have been doing in terms of depleted uranium and what the genetic impact of our own weapons systems has been. I mean, so as long as we have rule by secrecy, we may very well lose our civilization on Earth because we weren't told what the choices were or what the impacts of our activities were. So my truth campaign is in a broader sense, and I'm just using my own experiences in the time travel project and the Mars project almost as metaphors for the fact that we need a new era of openness in government because our group survival will probably depend on it. Because when small elite groups make these kind of decisions, they don't necessarily reach the right decisions. But for example, how about permitting us to go up there with weapons? Maybe the policy should have been, if you draw the Joker card and there's a predator that you can't outrace in front of you, start saying your prayers. You're not going to have a gun because we don't want to start an interplanetary war. That seems to be a more exopolitically sufficient approach that I would have advised if I had been an Undersecretary of Defense asked to, comment on that white paper about what we were going to furnish, the Mars teleportees. I mean, think of the implications of that. They gave me a weapon at 19 where I could go and potentially turn a Martian life form into a pile of ashes.
Brett at 13.
Yeah. Or Brett. Well, no, Brett wasn't furnished a gun.
Oh, I see.
But I'm saying that they did furnish some of the Mars visitors with guns, and that could have prompted an interplanetary war. Yes, sir.
Are you sure that the gun even worked? They were ever fired to see if it worked?
Well, I didn't fire mine, but the one they showed me in La Cañada worked extremely effectively.
I was wondering if all the people who went to Mars, who were given weapons, it was a dud.
That may explain why I got one and Brett didn't. Maybe they were just bolstering my courage, I don't know. But I think it worked because, that animal, whatever it was, a cow or I think it was a goat, it was just
It was
reduced
part of the deception problem.
to a stack of ashes. It wasn't even charcoal. It just could have, it was just a pile of diaphanous black ash. Star.
I guess the good news is, should you be the candidate for president in 2016, that will mean that we have come out into the open, that these things will be brought out to the public, because it would be part of your history, your public record. We know where you were born, there's never going to be any birthers around or anything like that.
I think that the solution to the paradox that now that I've brokered myself into the position where I've revealed that I was told that I win at some point, the presidency, and that I can either lie about it and violate the tenets of my truth campaign, or if I talk about it and be truthful, I can harm my campaign by making it sound like a fait accompli. I think I evolved the solution to that tonight where I said not if I'm president, but when I'm president, and then turn that into a joke. And not just a joke, but also say basically say, I know I'm going to win, but the difference is the last ones who knew they were going to win didn't tell you. Right? In other words, use a double truth approach. Yeah, I'm going to win, and it's not because I'm descended from whoever David Icke says, Charles the First or something, or William of
Yeah,
Orange.
here's my first
I don't have any British ancestry that I know about, so I can't be in that lineage of 44 men who have all been Charlemagne descendants and descendants of Charles the First and William of Orange or whatever it is. And I'm certainly not a Freemason. So I'm just saying that, my approach is going to be, yes, I win, but none of them told you,
Yeah.
which is the situation.
Carter through.
And that may garner enough laughter to win in such a country.
Well, you'll have my vote and our vote. I'm
This
sure.
is the civilization that brought us South Park and it's The Simpsons. That's the next line, right? Hugh, by the way, did you have a
I
question?
can't wait for the Andy character in South Park to come along in another year or two.
No, I thought that Charlie Sheen's thing for a while there was possibly shading some of my own shtick because he said I'm a rock star on Mars or something at one point. And he started talking about his truth campaign. I thought, oh my God, he's watching my YouTubes or something before losing his mind.
Or Denny Crane on Mars.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just going to have to tell the truth and see if people get it. But I think it's going to be something that at least George F. Will is going to get stuck on for a while, or Patrick Buchanan.
Oh, boy, yeah, that'll be good. That'll be really good.
In the George Stephanopoulos interview, I don't let slip that I'm a Muslim. I let slip that I'm a time traveler.
Oh, I see you on you also.
Yeah. So just play it by ear. And it could be much, much later. I might run and make a fool out of myself in 2016, and then everything will be proved over 30 years, and I'll be called into commission, as the Ronald Reagan of the time-space age or something at 70. I don't have the time, So I could be the Harold Stassen of time travel on Mars for the next 36 years or something. So that's a good line to end on, I guess, right? The Harold Stassen of time travel.